Hello all and welcome back to our series of the most disappointing teams in NFL history, or at least the Super Bowl era. We're knee deep into it with our second entry, there's simply no turning back now. In our last video we looked at our number 33 entry, the 2000 Buffalo Bills. Before we head on to number 32, we want you to know that all our evaluations come from C-Score, a metric created by this channel that assigns value to each and every team of the Super Bowl era that takes a deeper look rather than simply going by its record. For a more thorough explanation of C-Score, be sure to check out the description of this video. In order to be considered disappointing, a team must have had some expectations coming into the season. That comes from prior performance, which in this case requires back-to-back seasons with a positive C-Score, the second of which must be higher than 15 and higher than the season prior. That third season, the disappointing one, would then result in a negative C-Score. The next team that fits this bill will take that number 32 spot, the 1989 Chicago Bears. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get this thing going. 1987 was a strike-shortened season that was further complicated by 3 games played mostly with replacement players, but that didn't affect the continued run of good seasons put up by the Bears. By going 11-4 with a plus 74 point differential, led as usual by the defense, Chicago landed themselves a C-score of 10.585. That would be on the field. Off the field, the strike created some other issues. Mainly, head coach Mike Ditka taking the side of the league and referring to his replacement players, dubbed the imposters of the Midway by others, as his real players. Those guys went 2-1 with the actual real Bears going 10-3. All in all, a good season, but a far cry from where they were just 2 seasons earlier. That would of course be the 1985 Bears, champions of Super Bowl 20, and still to this day, C-Score's greatest team of the entire Super Bowl era. They were still very good in 1986, and in fact allowed fewer points during the regular season than in 85, but they faltered in the divisional round of the playoffs at home against the Washington Redskins. With the 1987 regular season now over, and with all of the internal strife seemingly behind them, the Bears looked for their redemption in the playoffs, which once again involved a home game in the divisional round against, you guessed it, the Washington Redskins. With the top-seeded San Francisco 49ers already eliminated, a Chicago victory would give them home field advantage in the NFC Championship game against the Minnesota Vikings, a division rival they crushed at home in a replacement game and defeated on the road with the real players back. Instead, history repeated itself, and with Washington on the road to what would become a fairly improbable Super Bowl championship, the Bears' season once again came crashing down. 1988 saw several departures from Chicago, including Willie Gault, Wilbur Marshall, Gary Fensick, and the greatest running back in NFL history, Walter Payton. But Chicago fought on and rediscovered their defensive dominance, once again leading the league in fewest points allowed while struggling offensively. That still led to a 12-4 record, a positive 97 point differential, a 5th consecutive NFC Central Division title, and a C-score of 17.332. Not only did the Bears perform better in 1988 than they did in 87, they did so against a tougher schedule. But the drama continued. It would involve head coach Mike Ditka again, but this took on a more serious bent. Just over halfway through the season, Ditka, despite being healthy and having no family history of heart disease, suffered a heart attack. Those who remember Coach Ditka roaming the sidelines will know of his intensity, and coaching in a major market with championship aspirations can inflict a good deal of stress, and that is precisely what he attributed the heart attack to. Now, those who remember Ditka as a player will also know of his toughness. He was on the sideline that very Sunday and back in charge just 7 days later, and he was named the AP Coach of the Year for the second time in 4 seasons. That would be due in part to the Bears earning the NFC's #1 seed in the playoffs. With the Redskins nowhere to be seen, Chicago instead lined up against the Philadelphia Eagles, led by head coach and former Bears defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan, with he and Ditka known for having a somewhat strained relationship. But that relationship and its accompanying storyline fell under a fog once the game started. Literally. This was the infamous Fog Bowl, a game with 2 touchdowns and 7 turnovers. But the Bears won and finally returned to the NFC Championship game. They couldn't avoid the 49ers this time, but they did get to play them at home. But once again, the Bears fell victim to a team that was in the midst of a somewhat improbable Super Bowl run, considering the Niners were 6-5 entering the season's final stretch. More distressingly for Chicago, they were drubbed by a score of 28-3. 1989 saw more departures for the Bears with the advent of Plan B free agency. Gone were defensive stalwarts Al Harris, Mike Richardson, and Otis Wilson, so there may have been some concern over a drop-off in performance. But it was worse than just a simple drop-off, going all the way down to disappointment. The Bears saw their record crater to 6-10 while being outscored on the season. This time the defense was the culprit, dropping all the way down to 20th in points allowed. Playing the league's second hardest schedule helps out this C-score somewhat, but not enough to keep it out of the negatives at -1.951. There was another departure in the form of a trade. After years of discontent with the organization over a variety of issues, quarterback Jim McMahon was traded to the San Diego Chargers, incidentally right before a preseason game against the Chargers in Chicago. McMahon was never a superstar, and neither were those replacing him, but it reflected a larger issue within the organization. Despite holding little to no leverage under what was still essentially a system governed by the reserve clause, several players staged holdouts leading into the season, among them Sean Gale, Dave Duerson, William Refrigerator Perry, and future Hall of Famer Steve McMichael. These holdouts were all settled before the start of the season, but they almost certainly had an impact on the team as a whole. Most concerning for the Bears, though, were the players they did have available to them. The organization had been riding high for 5 years running, but even the top of the heap must replenish its roster through the NFL draft, and the Bears were notably bad at that during this time. No one expected the same level of talent of the 1985 squad, but what they got instead was a collection of players who made up the framework for a 6-10 team. Yet the beginning of the 1989 season looked nothing like that. Chicago jumped out to a 4-0 record, with 3 of those wins by at least 14 points. The trouble started in Week 5 when they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that finished the season averaging exactly 20 points a game, put 42 on the Bears in this one. In fact, if you remove this game from the equation, Tampa only averaged 18.5 points per game in their other 15. In 8 of their final 11 games, including each and every one of the final 6, the once vaunted Chicago Bears, the monsters of the Midway, allowed at least 26 points, and wouldn't you believe it, they lost every single one of them, quickly turning 4-0 into 6-10. They even found time to allow another 32 points to Tampa, this marking the first time the Bears ever took the season sweep against their then division rival. Their second to last home game of the season saw a drop in attendance of around 11,000 before another drop of around 8,000 for the finale. The mighty Chicago Bears, no longer able to rest on their laurels of a dominant championship-winning team from just 4 years earlier, were now looking to rebound back into relevancy. And while they had the bounce back they wanted in 1990 and 1991, it proved short-lived. The coach was fired after the 92 season, and in the 32 seasons since, they've had 9 winning seasons, 5 division titles, 4 playoff wins, and 0 championships. And it all started here with the disappointment of 1989. The 89 Bears now take their place ahead of the 2000 Bills on this list of disappointments. We should note, because we didn't really do so in our previous video, that the ranking of this list is based on how far a team's C-score dropped, not the raw number. It isn't a ranking of quality, it's a ranking of disappointment. And surely a team who went from a 40 to a -1 is more disappointing than a team that went from a 16 to a -2. Of course, we'll be adding to this list with each passing video. Thank you so much for taking the time today and for making it to this point of the video. Show the love by giving it a like, some shares, and by subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to ding that notification bell so you don't miss out on the rest of this series or anything else the channel has to offer. I don't think, in fact I highly doubt, that anybody would say that 1989 was the worst season the Chicago Bears ever had. In fact, it was their only losing season between 1983 and 1991. But perhaps it was the true turning point, where novelty and nostalgia gave way to discontent and despair. I would love to know your thoughts on this team, this video, the series up to this point, and as usual, anything else you may have on your mind, right down there in the comments section below. Thank you once again for spending some of your time with us, and until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.